My name is Caroline Whitman, and I used to believe I was the luckiest woman alive. Funny, isn't it, how love stories look perfect until you realize you're just a character in someone else's plot. For years, I lived in a brownstone apartment in Manhattan, the kind people stop and stare at, thinking someone happy must live there. And maybe once, someone did. I was 38. A published author. Married to a man who made life feel safe. Mark Whitman, financial consultant, the kind of man who could silence a room just by lowering his voice when he said my name, Caroline. It sounded like a secret only he and I shared. Every morning, a kiss on the forehead. Every evening, a whispered "You're my world." I believed him until I didn't. It was after midnight when the lie finally cracked open. The bed beside me was cold. At first, I thought Mark had gone downstairs for water, or to check the locks like he sometimes did, but then I heard it, his voice low. Controlled. The voice he used in board meetings, not bedrooms. It came from his office, a sliver of light under the door. She still doesn't suspect anything, he said. Everything's going as planned. Almost done. The words were soft, but they sliced through the silence like a blade. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, unnatural, as if the house itself knew what I'd just heard. I pressed myself against the wall, barely daring to move. Almost done. What was almost done? Who was she? When he returned to bed minutes later, his breathing was calm, almost peaceful. He slid under the blanket, wrapped his arm around me, and I lay there, pretending to sleep, pretending I hadn't just watched my marriage die in the glow of his office light. Morning came like punishment. He was still asleep, the picture of innocence, chest rising, lips parted. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, hands trembling. Something inside me, some quiet part that had always trusted him, began to burn. I reached for my phone. For 10 years, I had never once opened our financial app. Mark handled everything. Bills, savings, investments. I thought that's what love was, trust. But trust, I was learning, could also be the weapon that destroys you. One tap, then another. The numbers told a story my heart already suspected. $500 here. $1,000 there. $2,000. Dozens of withdrawals, not enough to scream theft, but enough to whisper betrayal. My breath hitched. Each transaction was a heartbeat of deceit. Then I heard him behind me, checking the account this early? His tone was casual, too casual. He leaned against the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck like he did when he lied. I turned, phone in hand. Just curious, I said, some of these charges look unfamiliar. He poured himself coffee. Didn't look at me. Oh, those? Just small investments. I must have forgotten to mention them. Forgotten. He smiled, that polite, rehearsed smile I used to love, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it went cold. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. A strange, sharp calm. I nodded slowly. Pretended to believe him, but I was watching now. Every shrug. Every half smile. Every glance at his phone that he quickly turned face down. That night, the sound of his text tone sliced through the silence again. He stepped out, saying, just business. But his voice had changed, softer, careful. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not jealousy, not fear, resolve. Whatever Mark Whitman was planning, he was about to learn something he'd forgotten, that I'm a writer and writers always find the truth. I thought I knew the man I married. But that night, I realized, I wasn't sleeping beside a husband. I was sleeping beside a stranger, and he had a plan. The only question was, did it end with me? The night I realized I was the target, there's a kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, it stalks you. That's what my home had become. Every sound felt sharper. The tick of the kitchen clock. The hum of the refrigerator. Even the creak of the stairs under his weight when he moved around at night. I had stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly. I just listened because I knew something was coming, and whatever it was, it had my name written all over it. I remember the night I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. It was raining, light, hesitant rain that tapped against the window like it was trying to warn me Mark was in the shower. That detail shouldn't matter, but it does, because for the first time in months, he left his phone on the dining table. He never did that. That phone had become an extension of his hand, his secret vault, his invisible wall. But that night, he walked away from it, left it sitting there under the soft glow of the chandelier, screen black. tempting. My heart started pounding. 50 seconds. 60. The water was still running upstairs. I moved toward it slowly, my hand trembling like it was reaching for a loaded weapon. The screen lit up. No password. Just, open, and that's when I saw it, the thread that didn't belong. No name. No contact photo. Just a number. Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done. I read it once, then again. Ilium files. Stay in the dark. Almost done. My mind couldn't keep up with my heartbeat. Who was her? Was it me? The air in the room thickened. My throat felt dry. I placed the phone back exactly how he'd left it, aligning the edges with the placemat like nothing had happened. Then I walked into the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and splashed water on my face until my reflection blurred. That reflection, she didn't look like me anymore. She looked like someone trying to survive her own marriage. When he came downstairs, steam still rising off his skin, he smiled like everything was fine. He kissed my forehead, the same rehearsed gentleness as always. You okay? Just tired, I whispered. Inside, I was screaming. He didn't know I had seen the message. He didn't know I had already started to see through the man I once trusted with my life. That was his first mistake, believing I was still the woman who would never look behind the curtain. The next morning, he left for work with his usual briefcase and his usual lies. The second the door closed, I called Anna Prescott. Anna wasn't just a friend, she was the kind of woman who could smell deceit from a mile away. My old college roommate turned a state attorney. We hadn't spoken much in years, but when she answered, her voice was calm, measured, like someone who had seen this storm before. I told her everything, every whisper. Every hidden transaction. The message about the Ilium files. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. When I was done, there was silence on her end of the line. Then she asked, Caroline, how much money are we talking? I hesitated. Then said it, close to 500 million. Another silence. Then her tone changed, clipped, urgent. Listen to me carefully. You need to move your assets. Now. I felt my knees give way. I sat on the couch, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the faint dent his coffee cup had left on the table. Are you sure? I whispered, yes. If you wait, he'll make his next move. We'll create a trust in your name. It'll be airtight. He won't touch a cent. A trust. A fortress. In that moment, I realized something cruel. I wasn't just saving my money, I was saving myself. The next 72 hours vanished in a blur of legal signatures, coded calls, encrypted emails, and panic disguised as focus. Anna moved like a storm in heels, relentless, precise, brilliant. We shifted the apartment title, rerouted the book royalties, froze joint accounts, restructured investments. By the time the third sunrise hit Manhattan, I was a woman my husband could no longer reach. Everything I had built, the home, the savings, the legacy, had been moved somewhere he could never touch. That evening, he came home with takeout and that same charming grin that used to undo me. Thought we'd have Thai tonight, he said. I got your favorite, yellow curry. He placed the bag on the counter, unaware that the world around him had already changed shape. I took the bag from his hand, smiled, said thank you. Inside, I wasn't thinking about curried, I was thinking about the message on his phone, about Ilium. About the stranger sleeping in my bed. He sat down, started unpacking dinner like it was any other night, and I just stood there, watching him, really watching him, the man I thought I knew, now a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. He looked up, caught me staring. You okay, babe? I smiled faintly. Never better. He believed me. Of course he did. That was his second mistake. I had built my fortress. But you don't build walls without enemies noticing. And soon, I realized. Mark wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets. The moment I realized the game wasn't over, there's a kind of victory that doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. By then, I had already built my fortress, every cent, every property, every royalty moved, sealed, protected. Mark could try whatever he wanted, but he'd never touch my life again, not my money, not my peace, not my trust, and I wasn't going to warn him. Let him believe I was still the same woman, quiet, trusting, half asleep. Let him make the next move, because now, I was ready. It happened 4 days later. A Friday evening, cold and strangely still, the kind of evening that hums with quiet dread. He came home early, tailored suit. Polished shoes, that familiar cologne that once made me feel safe now made my skin crawl. He placed his briefcase on the dining table, his movements practiced, almost cinematic. Then he looked at me, not like a husband, like a strategist. "We need to talk." The way he said it was rehearsed, as if he'd been practicing those words in the mirror all day. He slid a folder toward me, and even before I opened it, I knew what was inside: divorce papers. For a moment, I just looked at him, his calm face, his steady breathing, the small, satisfied curve at the edge of his mouth. He thought this was control. He thought he was ending it on his terms. "I think it's for the best," he said, his tone detached, almost pitying. "We've grown apart. I don't want things to get painful." I lifted my eyes, made sure he saw nothing. No rage. No sadness. Just quiet. "Really?" I asked. That one word caught him off guard. A flicker, just a flicker, of unease crossed his expression before he straightened again. "Yes. It's better this way." I nodded slowly. Then, without breaking eye contact, I slid the folder back across the table. "Before we go any further, there's something you should know." His brows drew together. "What?" I leaned forward slightly, calm and deliberate. "The way you speak when you've already won. I've already moved everything." He blinked, confusion flickering into panic. "What?" "The apartment. The accounts. The royalties. All of it. It's protected now. You can't touch a cent." His face changed color, the control slipping. You can't do that." "I already did." For a long moment, he just stared at me, searching for fear, for hesitation, for some trace of the woman he could manipulate. But she wasn't there anymore. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "Life is unpredictable." He pushed back from the table, slow and deliberate. "We'll see each other in court," he said finally, his voice clipped and cold. I smiled, small, calm, dangerous. "Then go ahead. Try." He grabbed his briefcase and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to make the frames rattle, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. He knew. He finally knew that I wasn't his puppet anymore. I thought that was the end, but the thing about men like Mark, they don't stop when you leave the game. They make new rules. 5 days later, the silence around me began to shift. Not loud. Not obvious. Just strange whispers, glances. People who used to greet me in the hallway now looked away. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, but then Rachel, my assistant, walked into my office, pale, hesitant, holding a piece of paper. "You need to see this," she said quietly. It was a printout. A screenshot from an anonymous forum headline. "CFO hides funds during divorce using company money." Below it, an accusation. A woman, unnamed, accused of embezzling funds to protect herself during a divorce. The comments were worse, filled with speculation, rumors, filth, and then, in the middle of it all, one line that froze my blood. "I know who it is, Caroline Whitman. Look into her." My stomach dropped. My palms went cold. Mark. It was him. It had to be. "He's trying to ruin me," I whispered. Rachel said nothing, but the look in her eyes told me she believed it too. "If this spreads," she murmured, "it could destroy your reputation, or worse." I stood up, pacing the room, my mind spinning. I had built my career brick by brick, no shortcuts, no handouts, no shadows, and now, one lie could undo it all. "I need to call Anna," I said. That evening, I sat across from Anna in her glass-walled office, the city lights flickering behind her like distant fires. I told her everything, the post, the whispers, the comments, the timing. By the time I finished, my voice was trembling with something I hadn't felt in a long time, not fear, fury. "This isn't personal anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's not just trying to take my money. He's trying to erase me." Anna leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then we make sure he fails." But I didn't know yet, Mark wasn't acting alone. Someone else had joined the game. Someone closer than I ever imagined. The lawsuit that almost broke me. Anna's voice still echoes in my head sometimes, sharp, composed, like the calm before a storm. "Professionally," she'd said, leaning back, fingers steepled. "He's playing dirty." Back then, I didn't even flinch. I was too numb to fear anything anymore. "Dirty?" I asked. She looked at me with the kind of pity only lawyers and therapists perfect. "He wants to force your hand, scare you into a settlement." Classic intimidation move. I remember my reply, steady, cold. I'm not backing down. It sounded brave at the time. Maybe it was just survival instinct. 5 days later, bravery tasted like bile. Anna's call came early that morning. Her tone, clipped, surgical. Come to the office. Now. When I walked in, she didn't bother with small talk. He just filed a lawsuit, she said. I blinked. For what? Financial fraud. He's accusing you of embezzling joint assets. For a second, my world tilted. The air felt thinner. He can't be serious. He is, she said quietly. And, he's not alone. That's when she slid the file toward me, a manila folder that felt heavier than my entire past. Inside it, numbers, forged documents, fake transactions, my signature copied in shaky ink, and at the top, one name, Alamro. A name that once appeared on Mark's phone. A name that had no right to resurface here. I looked up. Who is he? Anna crossed her arms. A known fraudster. Tied to multiple forgery cases. No convictions, but a long trail of rot. Something cracked inside me then, not from fear, but fury. He was teaming up with criminals now. My husband, I barely remember that week, the blur of coffee cups, sleepless nights, and digital forensics spread across my kitchen table. Anna brought in an expert, a forensic finance analyst who could trace transactions to their shadows. We worked day and night, dissecting every line, every false zero, every forged signature. Some mimicked my handwriting perfectly, others looked rushed, desperate. Every discovery stung like betrayal on paper, but piece by piece, the lies began to unravel. The documents didn't match my real accounts, the dates were off, the metadata led back to Alamro's firm. Mark had buried himself in his own deception. Then came the courtroom. I remember how cold it felt that day, even in my navy suit, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across the room, Mark looked smaller somehow, agitated, twitching, eyes darting like he was searching for a version of himself that hadn't yet fallen apart. Anna stood. Calm. Razor sharp, her voice filled the courtroom with quiet authority. Every fact she presented was a nail in his coffin. Every forged signature, every mismatched record, every missing trail, all of it painted one picture. Mark had fabricated everything. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. The silence in the room was surgical. When the verdict finally came, case dismissed, I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes. It wasn't relief. It was finality. A war quietly ending. Mark lost more than his case that day. He lost access to my trust fund. He lost credibility, and the court ordered him to pay my legal fees. When I left the courtroom, he followed me into the hallway. You didn't have to do this, he said, his voice trembling between guilt and blame. I stopped, turned to face him, one last time. No, Mark, I said. You didn't have to do this. And that was the moment I finally walked away, not out of anger, but out of peace. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt in silence. My apartment felt different, quieter, cleaner, honest. I started writing again. Not for anyone else, not to explain, just to remember who I was before the lies. I walked every morning, just to feel my lungs work again, and sometimes, when the air was still, I'd think about how close I came to losing everything, my name, my dignity, my truth. Mark wanted to wear me down with deceit, but all he did was teach me how to fight fire with clarity. You see, sometimes the people who know your weaknesses best aren't strangers, they're the ones who once held your hand, but when they weaponize that knowledge, they forget something vital. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to outlast the lies. Owning the sky. There's something strange about silence. After months of noise, the calls, the accusations, the paper cuts of betrayal, quiet doesn't sound peaceful. It sounds foreign. That's what I was thinking the morning I found myself sitting on a worn bench in Central Park. The air was sharp, still carrying the aftertaste of winter. I watched a woman across the pond laugh into her phone, her joy so effortless it almost felt like a language I used to speak. I didn't celebrate, I didn't toast to the court ruling or to Mark's downfall. No champagne. No closure playlist, just quiet, because sometimes victory doesn't roar, sometimes it exhales. I remember closing my eyes and letting the city breathe around me, dogs barking, runners passing, a saxophone somewhere in the distance playing the kind of song that reminds you of what you've survived. For the first time in months, my chest wasn't tight. There was no pending email, no lawyer waiting, no next move to plan, just me. And the quiet I had fought for, peace, I realized, isn't always joy. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear, and that absence, that nothingness, can feel like everything you ever needed. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed through this, the woman who begged for explanations, the one who screamed at the lies, the one who stared at forged documents and felt her own name turn into a weapon, and finally, the one who decided to stop defending and start living. That version sat on that bench, calm, steady, maybe even a little unrecognizable. You see, through all of it, I learned something I wish someone had told me earlier. Trust is a gift, yes, but control over your life is not. It's a right. And no matter how loving, how tender someone seems, never hand over your power blindly, not your voice, not your money, not your sense of self, because the moment you do, someone will mistake your softness for surrender. So, if you're listening, if any part of my story echoes somewhere inside you, remember this: be willing to act before it's too late. Protect what's yours, even if it means standing alone in a courtroom facing down the person who once promised to love you. And if someone ever tries to break you with betrayal, don't rush to burn them with revenge. Let truth do it. Let truth speak louder than the noise. That day in Central Park, I watched a small airplane trace a white line across the morning sky. It wasn't perfect. It wobbled, disappeared, came back, but it kept moving forward, cutting through clouds like it didn't need permission. And it hit me: strength isn't about surviving the storm, it's about owning the sky afterward. If this story found you, I whispered into the wind, maybe it's because you needed to hear it. If it resonated, share it. Someone out there might need that reminder. 2. That peace can follow chaos, that silence can mean survival, and that rebuilding doesn't always mean revenge. Sometimes it just means freedom.